You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, ep097. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Hello again, and welcome to episode number 97 of the Tricorder Transmissions. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Gold Key Comics, issue number 17, The Cosmic Cavemen. I am your host, Jeff Hewlett. Craig Cohen is still on assignment and should be back with us soon. And sitting in for him once again is our good friend, Mr. Chris Ritzer. How's it going, Chris?
Hello. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, and thanks for coming back. We had a really good time.
Yes.
A couple weeks back talking about the previous Gold Key, and I know we've been talking offline a little bit about some of the fun stuff that's going to happen in this comic, so glad to see you back here again. And are you ready to start talking about this issue?
Yes, I am.
All right. So as we do in many of the other issues we've done in the past, we will give you a countdown before we start talking about it so that you can quickly pause or tune out, read the issue, and come back if you don't want any spoilers. So we're going to start in 3, 2, 1. All right. So this issue has a big difference from previous issues, and that is we finally have a change of writer. And this issue is written by Arnold Drake. We still have the same artist, Alberto Giolitti, and inking by Giovanni Tisi. Cover art by George Wilson. So the star date for this issue is 1924.3. It was issued in February of 1973, and the cover price was 15 cents. So as we have in prior issues, we have a very descriptive cover here that shows a little bit of what's going to be happening in this issue, and it portrays a small away team from the Enterprise tied up with spears being pointed at them by some primitive-looking humanoids. And in the background is what appears to be a large stone carving of Mr. Spock's head with some sort of fire pyre burning in front of it. And there's also a tagline on the cover that says, "Behold the idol who demands the death of the three strangers." Chris, what did you think of this cover? Is this an interesting cover compared to the prior issue?
Yeah, this is a pretty cool cover. Honestly, the first thing I noticed when I looked at it was Scotty just taking like an axe right to the nuts. I'm like, dude, man, he's in a lot of pain. But yeah, seeing Spock back there, so yeah, obviously something funky's going to be happening. And kind of realized, like, probably right off the bat, too, you once again have like a low-tech culture story going on.
Yeah, that kind of stuck out to me too, that we've got more of these primitive, we've seen a lot of like kind of primitive humans in the comics in the past. And one thing I noticed right away is that this kind of threw me for a loop because I was expecting the blue shirt on the cover to be Spock, but it's actually McCoy. So
yes,
it was, I was expecting with the big Spock head idol in the background, you'd see a shocked looking Mr. Spock in the foreground looking at it. But so it looks like the away team is Kirk, Scotty, and McCoy. And a little bit of a preview here. It looks like Scotty's shirt is finally red in this issue.
Oh, yes, that's right, yeah.
So, and I'm happy to say that continues into the actual issue itself and was not just something that happens on the cover. So that's kind of an exciting change. Scotty's shirt has been many different colors in past issues, so we finally got him wearing a red shirt. So opening up the cover gives us the splash page that we're familiar with. And the splash page is very similar to the cover, but not quite as dire. The stone carving of Spock is still in the background, but this time there is some sort of like a tribal leader standing in front of it with a mask on, yelling at the landing party, accusing them of defiling some sort of sacred soil that their god, I hope I'm saying this right, Unruho.
Sounds good.
Oh, okay, good. And that it was Unruho's sacred soil, and that he is taking them to Locke the Wise, who I guess is their leader, who is going to sentence them to death Kirk remarks that they're worshiping a statue of Mr. Spock, and Scotty notes that they've never been to this solar system before. So that kind of implies there's sort of an impossibility here that if they've never been to this solar system, how could they possibly know what Mr. Spock looks like? So this is going to be the big mystery of this issue. And one thing I thought was really cool about this, Chris, and this is something Craig and I had talked about on prior issues, is that they're going where no man has gone before, which is what they were supposed to be doing on the show, but rarely actually did.
Yes, and I'm really surprised it's continuing in the comics, because you figure they'd go for grander things than they could actually do on TV, since they're stuck with a budget and have more crazy aliens. But yeah, we're still coming across humans out in the vast distances of space.
That excellent point. They have so many opportunities to bring in. I mean, they do bring in some kind of big one-off hulking monsters. There's one in this issue as well, and there's been a bunch in previous issues, but most of the villains, if not all of them, have been essentially humans. So you're right. I mean, you would think that they would kind of be more ambitious and start drawing cooler looking aliens. Hopefully in the future, we'll get some new alien races popping up here. Any thoughts on this splash page?
One thing I did pick up on as soon as I saw it was the art seemed very consistent with the previous issue. I thought the characters are looking good. Like, I could tell that was McCoy right off the bat when I saw him. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And it seemed like it was the same artist from the last issue. So it was nice to see the consistency there.
I agree. And it's cool to see Scotty's hair actually proper as well. He's gone through many different incorrect hairstyles in prior issues. So it looks like they finally got that nailed down.
Yes.
As well. So that's another point for consistent artwork. So moving on, there's a little blurb here on the splash page, and I'm just gonna read it out to you. It says, as they fly the endless seas of space, the crew of the Starship Enterprise constantly weigh anchor at strange and dangerous ports of call, but none so unusual as the planet Nisan, where fire is magic, the wheel unknown, and cavemen reign supreme. Very interesting. And this is something that's going to occur a couple of times in this issue, so I don't want to really dive too much into it now. But it seems in the very beginning they're extremely heavy-handed, telling you how primitive these people are.
Yes, yeah, true.
One final thing to say before we start discussing the actual story, and I'm not really fond of the caveman planet setting, but I do really like the Spock head statue mystery setup. Yes. It's just one of the first gold keys. I think it may be the first gold key for me that sets up a really intriguing, thought-provoking concept right in the beginning of the issue and doesn't pay off until way, way later.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Like, I didn't realize when I first saw this page, the two little alien heads off to the sides of the witch doctor leader guy there. You see, like, the two, like, sort of like alien skull looking things.
Yeah.
And they're mentioned later on. I did not pick them up the first time. Then I was like, back to the first page. I'm like, there they are. Okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a good catch. That's a good catch. I wondered what they were when I saw them, but I guess I kind of dismissed them. And I didn't think much about them because they're right there in the beginning, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a clue, but doesn't give away the actual mystery. So, of course, this is, again, a brand new author to the comics, so it's Arnold Drake. So maybe this was one of his writing techniques. He's kind of going for the teaser to get you thinking and keep you interested throughout the issue. Because you wonder, like, okay, it's a caveman planet. They're really primitive. Somehow they're going to get, the landing party's going to get captured, but how interesting can a caveman issue really be? I mean, I think it's a kind of a brilliant stroke to include that mystery part of it.
Yes, true. Very true.
All right. So are you ready to dive into this issue or anything further to share? Initial thoughts before we start?
No, let's move on.
All right. On we will move. So we are getting started here. While in orbit around an uncharted planet called Nisan, the sensors detect intelligent life forms on the surface. Now, let me stop for one quick second and point out the fact that the sensors finally freaking work. Because there were so many issues in the past. Craig and I have laughed about this time and time again, where they'll come across what the sensors say is an uninhabited planet that turns out to be habited. This one, the sensors are finally tuned up, and they're detecting that there's life on the planet. So
Yeah, it took a while to get them all the bugs worked out, and now they're good.
yeah, Scotty's been too busy trying to find the right color shirt and hasn't been able to fix
Yeah.
the sensors. So the life forms are undeveloped. So the planet is in a stone age of sorts. Kirk orders the crew not to interfere with the social and political structure on the planet's surface. So we have a little prime directive action going on here, but in spirit, not in name. They don't actually name it, especially since the planet is in a very formative time. Scotty comments that even leaving something as small as a button behind could change the future of the planet. So Kirk leaves Spock in command of the ship while he and Scotty and Dr. McCoy transport down to the planet's surface to take a look at what's going on down there and do some exploration. But as soon as they materialize, they hear a loud noise and are attacked by some primitive men carrying some stone spears and riding some sort of flying dinosaurs, which, I have to applaud them for putting in some flying dinosaurs, because that's something they wouldn't have done on the show. That's
Yes.
kind of cool.
True.
So Kirk orders McCoy and Scotty to fall back and protect themselves using stun power only on their phasers. But not long after that, McCoy is hit in the head and falls unconscious. As the cavemen start to pile up and overwhelm, Kirk decides the only way to not violate the Prime Directive and killing them is to surrender. So the landing party is disarmed by the cavemen and taken captive. Spock's voice is trying to come across the communicator to contact them, and this sets one of the cavemen off, and he stomps on the communicator, destroying it. So it's smashed to pieces on the ground. So McCoy regains consciousness, and they are taken before the tribe's leader, Locke the Wise, who turns out to be a female, dressed in an interesting costume, very show-like. And she's got some spiked hair and a purple cape. She tells the party that she could see them as they beam down, and she saw them in her mind walking on the sacred soil of Unruho. And she also comments that she has an eye that lives inside of her head. She condemns them to death for trotting on Unruho's soil, and they take them out into the village where they're going to carry out the death sentence in front of a large stone statue that appears to be carved in the image of Mr. Spock. They refer to Mr. Spock's statue as the visage of Unruho. So this is an interesting place to stop here. There's some weird dialogue here that I didn't actually read out. I was gonna save it for our little discussion here, but the couple of conflicting feelings I had right off the bat. Now, this to me feels very much like an episode of the original series put on paper. I mean, I could totally see this exact episode happening, minus the pterodactyls, but I could totally see, this feels to me just like a show episode, maybe like a third season.
Now, this is one thing I was going to talk to you about. Like, where would you place this show in a timeline? Because one thing I noticed with Spock throughout this entire issue, he is always yelling. Every single sentence he has ends with an exclamation point.
Oh.
He's yelling throughout the entire thing. So I'm thinking this might be like very early on.
Good call.
If you had to stick it somewhere.
Wow, I did not even notice that.
Yes, every single sentence from the very beginning, when he finds the people on the scanners, he's just screaming, "You heard me right, people. There's intelligent life down there, but totally undeveloped."
You know what? That really makes a lot of sense. I may have to change my my vote for where it should fit, because something else that I was going to mention is that some of the other characters' dialogue seems very out of character to me. So there's a particular moment here where where they see the statue and Scotty whispers to Kirk. He says, "Jim, do you see who?" And Kirk replies, "Yes, you fool, I see. Now shut up until we find out what this is all about." That is really not Kirk-like at all.
Yeah.
And the word fool comes up quite a few times in this issue, which I don't recall ever hearing any of the Enterprise crew refer to each other as fools on the show.
I guess they must have been very foolish in their younger days or something.
Yeah, I guess so. So maybe this does fit very early on. That kind of reminds me of the Spock from The Cage.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't the logic, and he yelled a lot.
Nonstop. Yeah, he's very emotional throughout this entire issue, really.
Yeah.
And so I think this is kind of early on. Spock doesn't have it together at this moment.
No, and I guess the other guys are kind of a little off kilter as well with their funky dialogue. There's some stuff I'll remark on later that really took me out of the story with this crazy dialogue choices. So there's a captain's log here also that I want to mention. I thought this was a little head scratching too. So it's Stardate, Captain's Log Stardate 1924.3, in standard orbit around the uncharted planet we have named Nissan. Our sensors and scanners have brought back strange tidings. Since when do they name planets on the Enterprise?
Oh.
That doesn't seem like their job.
Yeah, but hey, maybe they have like the official planet naming officer or something, and maybe they expect to come across a whole bunch of them, and they're going to have to do it like really quick.
It seems really odd to me that they would choose to name the planet, because on the show, there were so many times where the planets that they were exploring were the name of the system and then a number, like Rigel 7.
True. Yeah.
Why wouldn't this be the name of whatever system they're flying through and the number? I'm not sure. It seems a little inconsistent with the show, because I don't think they've ever actually named a planet before. But I guess we can forgive that. It didn't stick out to you as weird?
Yeah, it did stick out to me, definitely, yeah. Because I was like, I don't remember them actually ever naming a planet. Well, I was like, okay, I guess I'll let it pass.
All right, and another thing I thought was a little bit odd here, too, was we said they mentioned the Prime Directive, but not by name. They mentioned the actual directive itself of non-interference.
Yes.
But what happened to imitating the style of dress on the planet that they're beaming down to?
Yeah, they didn't put much thought into this whole beam down scenario at all. They just go down in their regular Starfleet uniforms. And then, don't they check to see if there's any like life signs around where they're going to beam down? Because they beam down in a perfect spot to get taken captive by all the K people that are riding on their pterodactyls.
Maybe the sensors aren't working as well as we thought.
Yeah, so I guess they have a few more little kinks to work out there.
Yeah, if Scotty can make it back to the Enterprise, he's got some work to do.
Yes.
So, I thought it was very, very, very strange and interesting that they mentioned dropping so much as a button on the planet, leaving it behind, could change the planet's entire course of history. But in the same vein, wouldn't the natives just seeing them in those Starfleet outfits change the course of history?
Yeah, the whole thing, just really didn't make much sense. They go talking about it, and then they're like, okay, let's go beam right down there with no other thought about it. And Kirk, his command needed a little bit of fine-tuning at this point, I think, in his career.
Yeah, agreed. All right, I've got a couple more things I can throw out there since we're still here. Let's see. So page 4, panel 1 mentions the transporter rematerializing the landing party. I don't think we've heard them use that terminology in the comics yet. So nice to see some more continuity from the show. During this opening sequence here, this is one of those things I mentioned prior to our starting to talk about this issue. Does it seem to you that Kirk is overly obsessed with the invention of the wheel on this planet?
Yes, and
he mentions it like twice, and he mentions it early, and then they're captured. His communicator is smashed. His hands are tied behind his head, but he's looking over some bushes as they're walking, and he's pontificating about how someday they're going to modify the logs they're rolling into wheels.
Yeah, that was like laugh out loud moments for me. Every time he brought the wheel back up, I'm like, what the hell is he? Why is he so obsessed with wheels? I guess he loves wheels.
I guess so. And this kind of goes, I guess, hand in hand with some of this other weird off the wall stuff we've been talking about. But they go way out of their way to not only tell us that the natives on this planet are undeveloped. They go through all the wheel stuff. They've got the stone weapons. They're very, very primitive. They're wearing, fur loincloths, but they speak perfect English.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what to make of that. I would have assumed they'd be grunts and groans or some sort of primitive language we don't understand.
Yeah, and I don't think they have universal translators. So unless the Enterprise crew learned their grunt and groan language, or the universal translator can sort of has a loudspeaker system. And translates it for them over a loudspeaker so they understand. So I don't know. But,
there's a couple of issues of the comics very early on where they attempted to explain how the Enterprise crew could understand these different aliens. It was this universal language of Esperanto, but they don't mention that here at all. So, and if they're really that undeveloped, how would they even know that Esperanto language?
Exactly, yeah. You can just, I think, throw that excuse out the window.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we shall move on to the next part of the story. So the landing party decides they need to make a break for it. So they kind of shed their bonds and try to start up a fight with these natives. Scotty runs up to this large flaming pot that's a cauldron that's right in front of Spock's head statue and burns away the ropes that are tying his hands. And then he just goes on this insane, violent tear that just it's amazing. If you've never read this issue, please just look this up because this is amazing.
It's like he got like a huge power boost from like the fire or something like that. It's like Mario Brothers, and he's going crazy, taking everybody out.
Yeah, and he's telegraphing all of his moves. So he takes two of the natives and he bonks their heads together to knock them out. And, he's free and he's trying to help Kirk and McCoy to overcome the guys that they're fighting. But just then, the Queen Locke throws this special powder of hers, it's the Sleep of Eternity powder, over them. And they all begin to cough and choke and pass out. So their escape attempt is unsuccessful. And they wake up in a place called the Halls of Eternal Rest. So Kirk is placed on an execution block, and this caveman guy with a very strange bug-like mask is preparing to chop off his head. So just at that very moment, miraculously, Spock beams down right into the middle of the scene, and the cavemen immediately recognize him as Unruho and begin chanting to him and are pretty much amazed that their god has chosen to appear in front of them. So this is almost like the C-3PO scene from Return of the Jedi, right?
Yes.
Where he's the Ewok god. But
yep, so the same thing.
So the landing party is taken back to the cave in the village. They're given some medical treatment to bind their wounds and some food. And they're being served. This is also really show-like, by the way. They're being served by these beautiful women. So this reminds me a heck of a lot of things that happened on the screen during the show. Yes. So Spock arrives at the cave wearing some ceremonial robes and tells the servants to get lost. He tells the Kirk that the cave people are called the Toll, and there is another tribe, which is a more violent and primitive tribe called the Kovars, which are mounting an attack on the Toll. So they're setting the Toll up as the good guys here. So the landing party is not allowed, of course, by the virtue of the Prime Directive to help the Toll, who apparently don't stand any kind of a chance against the more powerful Kovars. So Kirk turns to ask Scotty a question and finds out that Scotty has gone missing. So as it turns out, Scotty is off with Queen Locke looking at some crystal flower formations, and suddenly, as he's having his tender moment, a Kovar rushes out of the trees and begins to attack them, riding on a large beast. So Scotty and the Queen try to run away, but Locke stumbles, catching her foot on a branch, and wants Scotty to go on without her. But of course, in true heroic fashion, Scotty takes her up in his arms and runs back to the village to meet up with the others. So the Kovar attack has been signaled, and we are stopping here to discuss some of these interesting developments with Scotty and his apparent love affair with an alien woman that is just started. So let's roll back a little bit to the beginning of this, where Scotty breaks out of his bonds and has his psychobilly freakout fight scene, where he verbally telegraphs everything that he's doing. So using his head, freeing his hand, he's like headbutting people. He telegraphs freeing his hands with dialogue, banging their heads together. He's swinging a cudgel, talking about a Scotsman wielding a cudgel, and it's great. So, Chris, did you enjoy this fight scene as much as I did?
Yes, I was just laughing my ass off for this one. This was just fantastic. I'm like, am I really reading this? And it was. I'm like, yes, I am, and it's fantastic, and it makes this book worth it.
This is probably one of the big highlights of this book. It's a big action sequence here. One thing that really kind of made me raise the Spock eyebrow, as Queen Locke is starting to sprinkle the powder over Scotty, he turns around and asks her if she's bringing him some porridge. I'm like, porridge?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I got nothing.
So another question, I guess it's a technological question, since you are so well versed in the ways of Star Trek. In TOS, how did Spock know exactly where to beam down if their communicators had been smashed? Trying to figure that out.
I'm guessing they could just be scanning for human life signs that are like completely compatible DNA-ish or something like that. But
okay, I can go with that.
Yeah, why not?
I'm willing to believe. Obviously, they couldn't figure out where to beam down where they weren't in proximity of pterodactyl riding natives.
Yeah,
earlier.
exactly. Yeah,
but Spock knew exactly where to beam down. Yeah. So, and of course, the Spock beaming down in the middle of the village throws the Prime Directive completely out the window.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's...
Now that they've seen them materializing, I mean, what would have been worse? Spock beaming down or the Enterprise beaming the landing party up?
Exactly. At this point, I mean, you just beam them back and it's all good.
Yeah, we would totally believe that that Spock found a way to beam them back without the communicators, you know?
Yeah.
Spock could totally have done it. I don't know. I think that's a missed opportunity, but...
I like this one line here. Begone, maidens. Unruho would talk with these infidels alone.
Yeah, Spock really takes up that god mantle, doesn't he?
Yup. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, he's not like C-3PO where he ain't gonna. Spock's like, I'm gonna do this right.
You know, let me tell you, I wish that line was a line that was spoken by Spock on the show, because that would make one of the greatest sound bites.
Yes.
That would be an incredible thing to loop in some sort of techno Star Trek track, wouldn't it?
Yup.
Something else that made me wonder a little bit about how much insight Spock has into these Toll people, that he's speculating as he's talking to Kirk after they've been freed. Spock is explaining to Kirk that when their technology matches their art, they will make a great contribution to the universe. It seems like a kind of a rash prediction. Doesn't it? I mean, what indication does he have at this point that these are going to be a great and powerful people?
Yeah, I guess I sort of took that to mean if their technology, I guess since Kirk loves their artwork and they're kind of making a big deal about it, that maybe if their technology were to be that beautiful or whatever, they might end up being some good people in the end or something.
Oh, you know what? Maybe these people develop into the Baku from, what is it, Insurrection?
Maybe.
Because she's got these mental powers. Maybe they all develop into that peaceful, loving, everlasting tribe of people that Picard and company save. Maybe a comic book connection here. That's a bit of a stretch on my part, but anything further before we move on, sir?
No, I think that's it.
Alrighty then. So Kirk in his infinite wisdom, decides that they're going to beam back to the ship before they get entangled with the Toll and the Kovar battle that's going to erupt here any moment. So Spock tells the Tolls that they are leaving and that he's going to go with them as the god. He's going to take off, but he shall always be with them in their struggle to survive. Scotty says goodbye to Queen Locke in a little bit of an emotional scene. She bids him to go in peace and in love. The entire landing party beams back up to the ship. Scotty tells Kirk and McCoy how he will miss Queen Locke, and just then McCoy notices that Scotty's phaser is conveniently missing. And here's another one of those moments where the word fool comes in. So McCoy calls Scotty a fool. He says, "She took your phaser, you fool." So implying that Scotty was being duped and she was actually just trying to steal his weapon. Kirk and Scotty decide they have to go back down to the surface. It's now a two-man job, according to Kirk. And they want to retrieve the phaser, but they narrowly escape being seen by a large group of Kovars who are on their way to start the attack. And as the battle begins, the Toll people get beat down pretty hard. They take some losses, and Queen Locke decides it's time to use the stolen phaser to turn the tide. But just then, on top of the big Spock statue, Scotty heroically, triumphantly calls her out and distracts her while Kirk comes over and knocks the phaser out of her hand. So Queen Locke is defeated, and she's despairing that the statue to their god will be destroyed with the protection of the phaser, that the Kovars are going to come in and destroy their entire village. Scotty comforts her for a moment before he and Kirk are forced to run away. They flee into a nearby canyon, and they close the entrance with a cave-in with some phaser fire, trying to stay safe and stay hidden from the Kovars. But little do they know, the Kovars have climbed up the cliff sides around this canyon and jumped down and knocked both Kirk and Scotty out. So we are once again captured, freed, and then captured again. So meanwhile, back aboard the Enterprise, Spock is trying to figure out why the Toll consider him a god and have the statue in his image. But he finally figures it out. He remembers that way back on his first mission with the Federation, he was on a planet called Dukar and was being attacked by a huge creature that he says chilled his very bones. Spock had an uncontrolled reaction, thinking he was going to die, and made a mental cry for help. And that mental cry for help, an involuntary one, had been seen by Locke because she has these acute mental abilities. And he attempts to contact Kirk and Scotty to tell them what he has figured out, but he is unable to reach them because they have been captured again. So, Chris, this is where the explanation of the alien heads comes in, right?
Yes.
So take us through it, sir.
So here you see now that the aliens that Spock was going up against on this prehistoric planet were actually the alien heads that were next to him in the statue. Mm-hmm. So the girl with the telepathic power saw the alien heads as well. Interesting.
I kind of like that.
Yes.
I kind of like that. It's an interesting concept, but so we've got some things to dissect here, and this is kind of a comic book canon moment for me. So we're seeing Spock's first early Federation mission, right? They're kind of rewriting history a little bit here. This is not something that we ever saw on the show, so this is something the author came up with on his own. On this planet Dukar, and he's being attacked by this monster. This is where the big giant beast comes in. This mental call for help. This is like a Vulcan power that I don't think we've seen before this.
I don't know. And that's the thing, though. They say a mental call for help, but then they actually show him with his tricorder or whatever calling for help on it.
That is a little bit awkward. And this kind of reminded me of something. We've seen the reverse of this, I guess, on the Immunity Syndrome. So that was the season 2 episode with the giant amoeba where Spock detects the deaths of Vulcans who were on a ship nearby and the ship was destroyed.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's not really, I don't think it's really explained whether he has a sensitivity to other Vulcan life forms, or maybe those Vulcans made that mental cry for help as they were dying. That begs the question, though, since they've never been in this solar system before, what's the kind of range does that cry for help have? I mean, does it go like light years? I mean,
Yeah, I'm thinking those events didn't happen too far apart, and probably maybe like a few months apart or something like that. But still, that's a pretty good range though for telepathy to go on.
Yeah, and you would think, I mean, knowing that Spock or Vulcans in general have that kind of telepathic ability, why would Spock ever need to use a communicator? Couldn't he just telepathically communicate with anybody, since he seemingly has like an unlimited range?
Yeah, I guess they sort of figure that's a bit improper to invade another person's privacy with your telepathy.
I guess so. Well, he doesn't need Skype. He can call home whenever he feels like it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, he can talk to Sarek whenever he wants.
Yep.
But Spock being very willing to lie to the Toll people to uphold the Prime Directive, pretending that he is their god and willfully lying to them, was very intriguing to me. I'm not sure how to take that. I mean, yeah, granted, he did a really good job of it on the Enterprise incident, right, where he fooled the Romulan commander into thinking he was romantically interested in her. But so I guess he can do it when he needs to.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, he's done it before, I guess, so.
Okay, I can let that one go. What did you think? Speaking of the Enterprise incident, this is another kind of weird tie back to the Enterprise incident. What did you think of Kirk's big swinging kick to knock the phaser out of the girl's hand?
Oh, yeah, that was really good. Yeah, I like that, definitely. Yeah, the nice karate kick, flying, going there. And so it was very TV showish.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of that move that he did in the Enterprise incident where he kicked the phaser out of the Romulan guy's hands.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, too, I don't know if you noticed, some of the Toll people, they look a lot like Khan.
Really?
They'll have like the same sort of haircut, and it looks a lot like Ricardo Montalban, I think.
Check that out. Yeah, and they're all kind of ripped too.
Yep.
So that kind of fits the bill. Nice.
And I think it's really funny too how Scotty, they have like the running joke going again with him with bad luck with women. Now they're just taking advantage of him to get his phaser.
Poor guy. He's almost plays the Chekhov role.
Yep.
Here. So I like the capture, escape, and then recaptured thing that happens on the show so often. Kind of remember in Piece of the Action, they just kept getting captured over and over.
Yep. Didn't that happen in the last issue of the comic too?
Yeah, I think it did. And it's a different author too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of weird.
Yeah,
interesting.
They keep getting recaptured by the low-tech cultures.
Yeah, maybe they really were influenced by the show.
Yeah.
Anything else before we wrap this up with the conclusion?
No, I think that's it.
All right. So we're back on the planet. Kirk and Scotty are about to be flung into a bonfire by the Kovars, who are going to destroy the statue of Unruho at the same time. So again, Spock beams down to the surface and yells that the strangers must not be harmed, and he's a god, and he's only warning them, so they better take him seriously, or he'll unleash his powers upon them. The Kovars, who are primitive, are stunned by this, but there's one who doesn't buy into it. I guess he might be the leader, and he decides that he doesn't believe that Spock is really a god and tries to attack Spock with a kind of a bum rush move. But Spock, being kind of creative, starts to use the transporter to dematerialize out of the way of the attack and appear a little ways away and kind of taunt the Kovar guy who's trying to attack him. So this goes on for a little bit, and each time Spock keeps disappearing and reappearing, and the Kovar chieftain gets kind of pissed and tries to get his followers to attack him, but they are all too scared to do so, having seen Spock transporting around the village. So they decide that it's a better idea to live in peace with the Toll from now on, and Spock tells Queen Locke that the spirit of the universe is everywhere, in every form, and your finest worship lives in the deeds of your lives. So he tells her also in the same breath they should strike out on their own and not follow him as a god figure anymore. So once again, Scotty says goodbye to Queen Locke, and she gives him one of the crystal flowers as a going away present. So they beam back to the Enterprise, and this is a really weird scene, man. This is really, really weird. This is not the end of the issue comedy that you come to expect.
No.
So there's some sort of heretofore unknown rivalry or anger between Spock and Scotty. So Spock gets a little bit snotty and says, I see your cave queen gave you a little posy by which to remember her, Mr. Scott. How touching. So Scotty, apparently angered by this, says, I'll touch your nose with my fist if you keep that up, Mr. Spock. You've been asking for this for a couple of light years now. And challenges Spock to a fist fight. Just then, Kirk steps in to stop them and tells them that they'll both be wiping pipes for a month in the nuclear furnace room if they proceed with their altercation. So I don't know if this was intended to be comedy or not, but I don't really take it as such. Do you?
No, not at all. No.
Very weird, man.
Sometimes, like McCoy and Spock throw some barbs at the end, but it's more in joking. This is like Scotty just wants to whoop his ass.
and God, I'm happy that they didn't, because I think Spock would have wiped the floor with him.
Oh yeah, definitely. And Spock is like really out of character a lot in this issue. This is definitely has to be like early life Spock, because he's like picking fights with guys, he's baiting them and all that. He's playing God and loving it. And I mean, really breaking the Prime Directive big time by beaming down and pretty much telling people how to live and all that. Yeah, this isn't your fully baked Spock.
No, definitely not. I do love the inventive use of the transporter. I can't believe that this is the first time we've seen them do something like this. You would have thought this would have been a perfect thing to play with on the show, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess the transporter effect, that might have cost them a lot of cash.
Yeah, I guess so. It's probably not as simple to do because they have to stand perfectly still while they're doing it. And yeah, it probably would have been a little difficult. Nowadays on TV, it would be easy to pull that off. But of course, the Prime Directive, as you said, is in the dumpster here. So Spock winds up uniting two tribes who probably would not have been united at that point in history on that planet. But I guess to escape the scenario, they're allowed to bend the Prime Directive as they've done so many times before.
You got to do what you have to do so that they can go on to invent the wheel.
Yes, they must invent that. Well, I'm surprised Kirk didn't just beam a wheel down to say, here, have it. Here's some instructions. Here's how you can make another one. Then this not out of character nonsense exchange between Spock and Scotty is really off-putting at the end here. And it's a shame that they did that, because I kind of dug this issue, even though I'm not a big fan of the whole caveman thing, but I can really, really see in my head that this could have totally been done on the show. It would have been great.
Definitely. Yeah. And also I think for the most part, like Spock doesn't really come across as a fully big Spock in this episode, but for the most part, I think how the characters interacted, how they were speaking, it definitely seemed like an original series episode to me.
So I'm going to go out and say that because of the fact that this comic attempts to add some canon by showing us bits of Spock's first mission with Starfleet and this new Vulcan power of this mental cry for help, I'm going to give this issue a non-canon essential vote. What about you, Chris?
Okay, well, one thing, I don't think that wasn't Spock's first mission. That was for the Enterprise, I believe. He says our first mission. So I believe that's for the Enterprise ship itself.
I didn't
That's
read
why.
it
That's
that
another
way.
one of the things why I think this is like really early in their voyages on the first year of the 5-year mission. But yeah, if I put my brain in that, it's like an early, like before where No Man's Gone before that episode. Yeah, then it all sort of seems to jive, and I would say, yeah, make it essential. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we have a double essential vote here. So, Chris, I'm going to say your vote stands in for Craig's vote. So if he has an argument to that, we can allow him to rebut it in the future. But thank you once again, Chris, for stepping in here and talking about this issue with me. And we will be back next week on a regular episode of the show. Any closing thoughts, Chris, before we sign off?
Oh, no, just thanks a lot for having me on again, and I'm looking forward to doing it in the future.
All right, so catch up with us on the tricordertransmissions.com, facebook.com/the Tricorder Transmissions, or on Twitter at @TTT_pod. We will see you next week.